Wraith by William Toney. Chapter 16, Hidden Shadows. Aaron and Lilah, a fragile reunion. Aaron hesitated outside Lilah's hospital room, his heart pounding in his chest. He had spent weeks dismantling Marcus's gang, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Seeing Lilah awake, alive, and looking at him with those same trusting eyes. It was a relief, yet a reminder of how far he had fallen. He took a deep breath, gripping the doorframe until his knuckles turned white. The familiar voice of Allistor slithered into his thoughts. "She'll notice, you know," Allistor said, leaning against the corridor wall with his ever-present smug grin. "The cracks in you, the things you've done. Do you really think you can hide it?" "Shut up," Aaron muttered under his breath, pushing the door open. Inside, Lilah sat propped up against a pile of pillows, her complexion pale but warm under the soft hospital lights. The faint beeping of the heart monitor filled the room, a steady rhythm that matched Aaron's racing thoughts. She turned toward him, her eyes lighting up with recognition. "Aaron!" she exclaimed, her voice hoarse but filled with emotion. He crossed the room in a few strides, sitting beside her and taking her hand gently. "Lilah, I was so scared I'd lose you." Her fingers tightened around his, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of everything unsaid hung between them, but Lilah's soft smile broke the tension. "I'm okay," she said, her voice steady despite her obvious exhaustion. "I woke up and Marlowe came to see me. He said you've been busy." Aaron's jaw tightened, guilt flashing in his eyes. He avoided her gaze. "I just wanted to make sure nothing like this could happen again." Lilah studied him, her smile fading. "Aaron, what's going on?" "Marlowe said things about people getting hurt. About you." Aaron's breath hitched, but before he could answer, a knock at the door interrupted them. A nurse poked her head in with a clipboard, reminding them that visiting hours were nearly over. Aaron nodded stiffly and turned back to Lilah. "I'll explain everything," he promised, his voice low. "But not here. Rest for now, okay?" Lilah gave him a wary look but nodded reluctantly. As Aaron left, the weight of her unspoken questions pressed heavily on his shoulders. Charles Wright and Heiress, a game begins. Across town, Councilman Charles Wright paced the lavish office of his private residence, a storm of frustration boiling inside him. The leather-bound phone book on his desk lay open to Marcus's name, but his repeated calls had gone unanswered. His patience was wearing thin. 3 days, he muttered to himself. 3 damn days and not a word. "You're wasting energy, Charles," came a voice as smooth as silk and laced with mischief. Wright turned to see Heiress lounging in a high-backed chair by the window. The pendant around his neck glinted faintly as she toyed with a golden hairpin, her violet eyes sparkling with amusement. Draped in a sleek black gown, she exuded an aura of effortless power and chaos. "I don't have time for your games, Heiress," Wright snapped. "Marcus and his gang were my strongest assets in this city. If they're gone, they're gone," Heiress interrupted, her voice lilting with mockery. "That much is clear. Whatever happened to them, someone outplayed you." Wright clenched his fists. "Then I need to find out who. I can't let anyone think I've lost control." Heiress chuckled, rising gracefully from the chair. "Oh, Charles, always so serious. You really should learn to enjoy the little things." She glanced toward the pendant, her expression momentarily softening. "That trinket I gave you grants you power, but what's the point of power if you don't have fun with it?" "Fun!" Wright hissed. "This isn't a game. I'm on the verge of consolidating control over this city, and I can't afford distractions." But Heiress was already distracted. Her gaze settled on the maid dusting a shelf nearby. With a flick of her wrist, she sent a subtle ripple of energy toward the unsuspecting woman. The maid froze, her eyes widening as vivid hallucinations overtook her mind. She dropped the duster, her hands flying to her face as if warding off invisible attackers. "Please, no, don't hurt me," she shrieked, stumbling backward and knocking over a lamp. Wright turned to Heiress, his face a mix of anger and disbelief. "What the hell are you doing?" Heiress smirked, watching the maid cower in terror. "Just spicing things up. You humans are so predictable." "Stop it," Wright demanded, yanking the pendant around his neck. The maid collapsed to the floor, trembling but otherwise unharmed. Eris pouted, crossing her arms. You're no fun. I don't need fun. I need results. Wright growled. If you want to keep playing your tricks, do it somewhere else. I have a city to take over. Eris's smile returned, sharper than before. Oh, Charles, you think you're in control, don't you? It's adorable. Wright glared at her but said nothing. Deep down, he knew she was right. She held the real power, and there was little he could do about it. Jason Black, a dangerous imitation. In a shadowy alley on the outskirts of the city, Jason Black crouched over his latest victim. The man, a low-level drug dealer, lay motionless in a growing pool of blood, his chest marred by precise knife wounds. Jason wiped the blade clean, his expression cold and detached. The Wraith wouldn't have let you live either, he muttered, his voice tinged with reverence. He had been following the news of the Wraith for weeks, tracking the mysterious figure's targets and trying to replicate his methods. But unlike Aaron, Jason had no reservations, no moral dilemmas. His justice was absolute, and he reveled in the fear it instilled. Rising to his feet, Jason disappeared into the night, his thoughts fixated on the Wraith. He didn't know who the man was, but he knew one thing. They were kindred spirits, and when the time came, he would prove himself worthy of the title. Marlowe. Uncovering Shadows. Detective Marlowe stood outside the alley where Jason's latest victim had been found, his sharp eyes scanning the scene. The method was disturbingly familiar, another brutal killing by the so-called copycat vigilante. This isn't the Wraith, he muttered to himself, lighting a cigarette. Too messy, too personal. His thoughts drifted to Aaron, the man he couldn't quite figure out. Marlowe had no proof of Aaron's involvement in the city's recent chaos, but his instincts told him the Wraith was tied to him somehow. And now this copycat added another layer of complexity. Marlowe, one of the officers called, snapping him out of his thoughts. You need to see this. He followed the officer to the victim's body, where a note had been pinned to the man's jacket. It was scrawled in jagged handwriting. The Wraith's work isn't done. I'll finish it for him. Marlowe's grip tightened on the paper. Whoever this copycat was, he was escalating. And Marlowe had a sinking feeling that things were about to get much worse.